On Christmas night, my son looked me in the eye and said, "You're a freeloader." The room froze. I gave him until morning to leave. By sunrise, the police were at the door. What happened between that insult and the knock decides who keeps this home and who walks into the snow. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The dining room glowed with golden light, the kind meant to soften faces and cradle families in warmth. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier's shimmer, plates of roasted turkey, bowls of steaming potatoes, and Margaret's china, polished until it seemed almost holy, spread across the long table. Guests leaned in with laughter, forks paused mid-air, stories flowing. For a moment, it looked like Christmas should. Then Dylan's voice cracked through the air like a hammer. "You're a freeloader." The word seemed to echo against the window panes, against the wreath on the door, against the snow silently falling outside. Guests froze. Wine halted mid-sip. Stella gave the smallest nod, her hand resting on Dylan's wrist, steadying his performance. Jasper sat at the head of the table, his table, back straight, fork resting gently on porcelain. The 65-year-old widower didn't flinch. His eyes moved slowly, deliberately, from face to face. Mary's lips parted in shock. John set down his knife with care, as if afraid it might otherwise clatter. Tom's girlfriend Lisa looked from Dylan to Jasper, uncertain of the script she'd stumbled into. Jasper's voice was calm, lower than a whisper, but carrying across the table like iron sliding into place. "You have until morning to leave." For a heartbeat silence. Then the scrape of Stella's chair as she sat taller, ready to speak. But the silence was already filled by Jasper's words, measured, immovable. No raised voice, no trembling, just finality. The table no longer glowed. It had become a stage, a courtroom, a place where truths would collide before dessert was even cleared. And as the snow fell thicker outside, the promise of the night sharpened into a single image. By morning, the police would knock on the door. Jasper Hale returned home as the afternoon light began to fade, the kind of light that slipped quickly in December, leaving the streets in a blue haze before the street lamps had a chance to warm the snow. He brushed powder from his coat sleeves as he closed the door behind him, listening to the quiet sigh the hinges made. A quiet house had always been his preference, and for decades that was what he and Margaret had built. Now, even in the stillness of a Tuesday, the air carried echoes of other people's habits. Stella's perfume lingering faintly in the hallway. Dylan's jacket draped carelessly across the banister, the sound of water pipes complaining upstairs where no one had asked permission to run a shower. He set down the worn leather satchel that carried his volunteer log and book returns. The library shift had been light, mostly children running through the aisles and elderly patrons who smiled at him with the same warmth Margaret once did. Those hours at the library were his anchor, proof that his life retained its structure. He prized routines. Margaret used to joke that Jasper ran on a clock even when he slept, that he was the kind of man who would measure coffee beans one by one if a scale broke. He smiled faintly at the memory as he hung up his coat. Everywhere his eyes landed, Margaret's touch remained. The china cabinet by the dining room wall glimmered softly in the fading light. Behind the glass rested plates that only came out on Christmas Eve, polished every year, regardless of whether anyone was expected. The wooden nativity on the mantel stood slightly tilted, Joseph's staff carved by a local craftsman whose shop Margaret loved. Even the banister that ran up the staircase bore the smoothness of years of her hands polishing it during spring cleaning. Jasper let his palm glide over it now, almost as if her presence might greet him in the gesture. But the house had changed 8 months ago. What was once a sanctuary had become a boarding house. Dylan had arrived with promises of a short stay, Stella with the assurances of gratitude. They spoke of transition, of just needing a bridge between one apartment and the next. Jasper, never one to refuse his son, opened the door. He believed help should be a rope lowered down, not a chain wrapped around his own ankles. Yet what began as 2 weeks stretched into months, until the rhythm of his own life was drowned in the footsteps of others. He noticed the costs first in the mailbox. Electricity bills, once predictable, doubled with lights left on in rooms no one used. The water bills surged with endless showers and laundry loads that seemed to multiply by the day. Groceries, once a manageable ritual for one, now demanded carts filled with cuts of meat Jasper had never purchased, bottles of wine far removed from his modest tastes, and snacks that vanished before he ever had the chance to wonder how they tasted. Each receipt told a story, and Jasper, being meticulous, kept them all. They filled an old notebook on his desk, the same one he had once used for household repairs and budget notes. Now it was evidence, though he did not yet know it would be needed. 8 months is long enough to wear grooves into wood floors. Dylan's boots scuffed the entrance. Stella's decorations crept onto shelves where Margaret's keepsakes once stood. The living room grew crowded with their laughter, which somehow never felt like celebration, but more like conquest. And Jasper, who had once commanded engineering projects with dozens of employees, found himself silent in his own home, shrinking at the edges. He reminded himself that kindness had rules, even if unspoken. Father could help his son, yes, but help was not meant to be indefinite. A bridge was meant to be crossed, not camped upon. Each evening, he repeated the vow under his breath. Help is a bridge, not a residence. Yet, when he looked at Dylan, tired eyes behind a mask of charm, he felt the tug of paternal duty. And when he looked at Stella, poised, always quick with thanks that sounded rehearsed, he doubted whether drawing lines would ever come without tearing bonds. The ledger grew heavier. Jasper would sometimes sit at the kitchen table after midnight, the house finally quiet, and flip through the notebook. Here was the down payment on Dylan's promise of groceries. Here the charge for a streaming service he never used, run through his account because Dylan's card had expired. Here the spike in water consumption, charted month by month. His engineer's mind could not ignore the trend, the clean slope of costs rising steadily while his pension remained fixed. Even the small comforts were taken. His favorite recliner became Dylan's throne, a place where Jasper now perched only when it was vacant, as if visiting rather than belonging. His chipped ceramic mug, a gift from Margaret after 30 years of marriage, vanished into Dylan's rotation of morning coffee cups. He found it once, abandoned on the counter with a slick of cold coffee inside, the words "World's Steadiest Handyman" blurred by stains. Jasper rinsed it clean with slow precision, jaw tight, telling himself it was just a cup. But in truth, it was never just a cup. The cost was not only measured in dollars, it was measured in silence, in space surrendered, in the way neighbors now waved from the sidewalk and asked after Dylan before they asked after him. It was in Stella's casual authority, her tone when directing where dishes should be placed or how curtains should be drawn. It was in Dylan's laughter, tinged with mockery, when Jasper mentioned Margaret's traditions. Each moment was a subtraction, and Jasper felt himself reduced to decimals in his own equation. Still, he endured. Winter was coming, and perhaps after Christmas they would find their footing elsewhere. That was what he told himself when he returned from volunteering, when he polished Margaret's china alone, when he sat with the notebook on his lap. Bridges could not carry weight forever. Eventually they had to lead somewhere. He believed that truth would assert itself without his intervention. But deep down, beneath the careful routines and quiet evenings, a sharper understanding was forming. Margaret would not have allowed their home to become this. She would have smiled politely but drawn a firm line, reminding all who entered that the house was built with sacrifice, that its peace was not to be bartered away. Jasper could almost hear her voice when he touched the banister. Respect yourself, and others will learn how. That night, as snow thickened outside, he closed the notebook and set it carefully on the crotch of the desk. His vow lingered in the air like frost on the window. Help is a bridge, not a residence. He whispered it once more before bed, a man rehearsing not only a truth, but a future he would soon be forced to claim. By Christmas Eve morning, Jasper already sensed the shift. The house no longer followed his rhythm. It pulsed with Dylan's, with Stella's, as if every room bent slightly toward their preferences. He stood in the doorway of the living room and saw the proof in a single snapshot. Dylan sunk deep into Jasper's recliner, legs spread, remote in hand, coffee balanced on the armrest. The recliner had once been Jasper's command chair, the place where he ended each day, book in hand, Margaret beside him. Now Dylan lounged as if it had always belonged to him, the cushions molded to a different weight. "Morning?" Dylan muttered, not looking up from the television. His voice carried the casual dominance of someone who believed he had nothing to apologize for. In the kitchen, Stella moved briskly, giving instructions to no one in particular but spoken loudly enough to carry. She dictated where serving spoons should go, how the turkey ought to be basted, even which platter was appropriate for the cranberry sauce. Her hands moved confidently over Margaret's china, as though it had been left to her in a will. Jasper stood at the threshold, watching, a silent witness to his own gradual erasure. The smell of an expensive turkey roasted with herbs he had never bought filled the air. On the counter stood bottles of premium wine, labels Jasper recognized only from glossy ads, never from his shopping list. He had always chosen simple wines, the kind Margaret used in stews. These bottles carried price tags that made his pension ache. Yet they sat on his counter, purchased with money that had left his account without his approval. He cleared his throat. "Where did you find the guest list?" he asked, voice measured. Stella turned, smiling brightly, too brightly. "Oh, Dylan and I wanted to make sure the evening was festive. A few extra friends. Tom's bringing someone, and the neighbors will love it. Don't worry, old man. We've got it covered." The phrase landed sharper than she likely intended. "Don't worry, old man." Jasper caught Dylan smirking behind the recliner's headrest. The first direct cut, spoken so casually it could almost be mistaken for affection. But Jasper heard the edge. He swallowed it, the way he had swallowed so many small humiliations over the last 8 months. He retreated upstairs, the murmur of Stella's orders and Dylan's laughter fading as he climbed. His steps slowed at the landing where a shelf held a family photo album, its cover worn from decades of use. He carried it into his bedroom, sat at the desk, and opened to the first pages. Photographs of Dylan as a boy filled the sleeves. Dylan in overalls, his hair sticking out from under a baseball cap, a wide grin stretching his cheeks. Dylan in high school, holding a trophy, pride shining in his eyes. Margaret had insisted on documenting every stage, and Jasper had never disagreed. They had believed in their son's promise that he would carve out a life of strength and responsibility. Jasper turned the pages slowly, his thumb tracing the edges. Each younger version of Dylan stared up at him with the energy of someone striving forward, and then he thought of the man downstairs, 35, jobless, sprawled in a recliner that was not his, drinking wine he had not bought. The contrast struck him like a blow. What had gone wrong in the years between these photographs and this Christmas Eve? He lingered on a picture from Dylan's college graduation. Jasper had worn his best suit that day, Margaret's eyes shining as Dylan shook hands with the dean. They had dreamed that their son would rise beyond them, make choices they never could, build a life of his own. Instead, here he was, dependent, defensive, turning the home that raised him into a stage for entitlement. Jasper closed the album gently, pressing it flat as though sealing the memories inside. His jaw tightened. A decision was forming, quiet but steady. He did not speak it aloud, not yet. To speak it would be to ignite conflict too soon. But inside him, something long dormant began to stir. He rose from the chair and crossed to the window. Outside, snow fell heavier, layering the yard in clean white silence. The street was hushed, neighbors inside their homes, lights twinkling through curtains. His own house, however, brimmed with noise not his own. He could hear laughter rising from the living room, the muffled thud of music Stella had insisted set the right mood. Jasper pressed his hand to the glass. Margaret's voice, imagined but firm, seemed to echo in his mind. Respect yourself, and others will learn how. Downstairs, Stella called again, her tone brisk. Dylan, bring the carving knife. We'll need it tonight. Jasper exhaled slowly. 8 months had passed since Dylan and Stella moved in. 8 months of rising bills, vanished privacy, and small but constant erosion of authority. Tonight was only the culmination. The house no longer felt like his, not in the way that mattered. But he knew something that Dylan and Stella had forgotten. A deed did not lie. Receipts did not disappear. A father's patience had a limit. He straightened, closed the blinds, and placed the photo album back on the shelf. His decision had not yet found words, but it had found shape. Quiet, solid, inevitable. When he returned downstairs, Dylan was laughing at something Tom had said on the phone. Stella was setting another place at the table, her movements smooth, rehearsed. Neither of them noticed Jasper standing there, watching. Neither of them understood that the bridge they had camped upon was beginning to crumble under their weight. He said nothing. He let the evening unfold. But inside, a clock had started ticking, and Jasper knew exactly who would hear it strike first. Morning arrived with a brittle brightness that made the snow glare like glass. Jasper woke early and listened. A thud from downstairs, the furnace's low breath, water lines chattering as someone turned a tap he had not approved. He buttoned his cardigan, paused at the stairs as if standing in the wings before walking onto a stage that used to be his. The dining room told him everything. Margaret's good china had been taken out without asking. Plates with thin gold bands sat in neat stacks on the sideboard. A cream tablecloth ran the full length of the oak, muting the grain. In the center stood a new arrangement: winter roses, eucalyptus, glittering branches, shedding silver dust. Stella hovered with a ruler, shifting the vase a fraction one way and then back. That cabinet has a key, he said evenly. We found it in the drawer, Stella answered, bright and efficient. The white cloth felt harsh, so the cream warms the room. People will feel cared for. Jasper looked at the oval that had hosted birthdays, quiet suppers, and the calm of reading with Margaret. Now it looked ready for a magazine spread. He wanted to run his hand over wood he had refinished, but the cloth denied the urge, turning oak into scenery. In the kitchen, the counters held a banquet's clutter. 2 roasting pans waited on the stove. Trays of vegetables glistened under plastic wrap. Cakes cooled on racks beside glass bowls he had not owned. The refrigerator was relabeled, his leftovers pushed to the bottom. The air tasted of butter, rosemary, and performance. Dylan opened a cabinet and reached for Jasper's mug without looking. The chipped ceramic cup with its faded handyman slogan fit easily in his hand. He poured coffee and tapped a rhythm with the spoon. A dark ring bled beneath the cup. Jasper pictured himself later, scrubbing the mark away. My mug, Jasper said. We're all family, Dylan replied, taking a sip. Besides, coffee tastes better in this one. You want some, Stell? In a minute, she said, stirring a saucepan. The glaze needs one more simmer. Stella clicked through a list clipped to a stand. Dylan moved with the confidence of someone who believed motion equals contribution. Boxes of crystal flutes sat on the floor, invoices tucked beneath the lids. Bottles of premium wine lined the counter with labels turned outward. Jasper did not recognize the vineyard names beyond their price tags. My pension paid for their performance, he thought, and the sentence set like stone. People will remember this Christmas, Stella said. They will, Jasper answered, hearing steel where he had hoped for softness. On the sideboard, a ceramic dish held small place cards in looping calligraphy. He thumbed through them and read the roster written over his authority. Mary and John, Anne, Tom and Lisa, 2 from Dylan's old office, a couple Stella knew from a tasting, 12 names, none of them his. Where am I meant to sit? He asked. Stella studied the lineup like a puzzle. At the end, she decided, by the window. It will feel cozy there. The head of the table was symbolically dressed, as if it belonged to a concept, not to him. Dylan began placing pine cones down the runner, whistling off-key. Tom offered to carve, Dylan said. He's great with knives. Jasper's eyes went to the carving set Margaret bought for their 10th anniversary. He closed the drawer and let the heat pass without catching flame. I'll handle timing, Stella said, checking her list. We want a 20-minute rest after the turkey. Potatoes will be piped, not scooped. Presentation matters. Presentation matters, Jasper repeated, because he did not trust what else might come out. By 10, the house sounded like backstage before an opening. Dylan adjusted candles, forgot to light them, and adjusted them again. He hunted for the corkscrew in the wrong drawers. He announced that regular glasses would cheapen the champagne and that the new flutes solved everything. The word cheapen scratched at Jasper like grit. He went to the den and opened the old notebook. Receipts slid out. He sorted them by date and category, the columns forming a slope any engineer could read. Electricity up, water up, groceries doubled. Specialty charges signed by one of them because the card on file was his. The tally for 6 weeks matched a number he associated with a month of quiet living for 2. He shut the book. Evidence would be for later. Returning to the living room, he found his mug abandoned on the table, a thin ribbon of coffee cooling. He rinsed it, dried it, and slid it behind a stack of less sentimental cups. Dylan breezed in, lifted a different glass, and filled it with orange juice. You okay, Dad? Dylan asked, cheerful, wary. I'm observing, Jasper said. We wanted to celebrate properly, Dylan answered. You always get tight about money. It's Christmas. People deserve a nice time. Properly was a righteous word you could hide behind in someone else's kitchen. Jasper gave no answer and watched Dylan fidget beneath the quiet. Snow's stacking, Jasper said. I'll clear the drive. Outside, the cold stung his cheeks and steadied him. Through the window, the cream cloth glowed. The centerpiece threw small sparks. From the sidewalk, it looked welcoming. He shoveled in steady rows, the evening's weight dropping through his arms. The picture would not hold steady. It kept tilting toward conflict. When he came in and set the shovel by the door, he counted chairs. 11 around the main table, 2 along the side wall for overflow. He checked the attic rack and saw 1 chair missing from the usual place. He opened the closet, found the folding stool she used for icing cakes, carried it to the dining room, and placed it by the window. That won't do, Stella said quickly. It ruins the balance. It will suffice, Jasper said. She waited, smiled, and promised to find something better. Dylan arrived with a box of ornaments. 1 ornament cracked. Stella tapped his wrist and said it was fine. The light would hide it. Dylan stepped over the shard without picking it up. Jasper walked the room, fingertips skimming chair backs. 12 cards. A centerpiece they had not chosen. A cloth that hid the wood he and Margaret had nursed back to life. Candles matched to color, not to scent. The inventory wrote itself. From far enough away, every small subtraction formed a map. The hall clock chimed 1. Stella clapped once and announced a 20-minute break before assembling canapes. Dylan lifted a glass and said, Almost showtime. Almost, Jasper thought. He washed his hands, dried them, and aligned 2 forks on the sideboard. When he looked up, Stella was considering him as if he were another object to arrange. He gave her a small nod, polite, not agreeing. She returned to her list. Jasper counted the name cards again. 12. He added, in his head, the only number that could restore the room to truth. 13. Then he walked to the hallway and let the clock keep time without his help. The clock answered with patient indifference to his steady silence. By late afternoon, the driveway was cleared, the lantern above the porch glowing against the drift of snow. Jasper adjusted the wreath Margaret had chosen years ago, straightened the bow, and stepped back. For a moment he let the air cool his lungs, steadying himself for what was coming. From inside came laughter, pots clattering, the rustle of Stella's dress as she hurried from kitchen to dining room. The house was ready, though not for him. The first knock arrived just before dusk. Jasper opened the door to find Mary and John Smith, their cheeks red from the cold, arms carrying a bottle wrapped in green foil. Mary leaned forward to kiss his cheek, calling him the perfect host. Jasper smiled, accepted the bottle, and stepped aside to let them in. But before he could usher them toward the warmth, Stella appeared, sweeping forward with practiced brightness. "You found us," she said, voice rising like a stage line. Come in, come in. Look at the snow on your coats." Let me take that John offered the bottle to Jasper, but Stella's hand was already outstretched. Mary praised the glow of the table, the arrangement of roses and pine cones, and Stella flushed with satisfaction. Within moments, the attention had shifted entirely. Jasper stood by, holding the empty wrapping paper, listening as Mary told Stella how elegant everything looked. His presence was reduced to the doorway, as though his role had been to answer the bell and nothing more. Another knock followed quickly. Ann Wilson arrived with a tin of cookies. She pressed them into Jasper's hands, smiling warmly. "Dylan said these are your favorite, dear. I baked them special." Jasper looked down at the frosted shapes, sugar sparkling under the hall light. They were not his favorite. Margaret had always baked spice cookies with clove, not sugar, but he only nodded. "Thank you, Anne," before he could. "Explain," Stella called out. "You're a treasure, Anne. We'll set those right by the cocoa later." Dylan was right. Jasper loves them. Anne laughed, her assumption cemented. Jasper let the moment pass, tasting the sourness of decisions made in his name without his voice. Tom arrived next, arms slung around Lisa, his younger companion. He clapped Dylan on the shoulder the moment he saw him descending the stairs. "Man, this place looks incredible. Didn't know you had it in you." Dylan grinned, pleased. "Told you we'd make it special." Tom's gaze swept the room, lingering on the chandelier and the polished table. "Love what you've done with your place," he said. Jasper felt the words lodge like a splinter. His place, his mortgage, his walls filled with Margaret's touch. Yet Tom's compliment fell on Dylan, who absorbed it as naturally as breath. Jasper retreated to the corner where the bar cart stood, polished wood gleaming. Margaret had given it to him for their 20th anniversary, a piece he had always rolled out on special occasions. Tonight, he pulled down glasses, uncorked bottles, and poured drinks for the guests. The irony did not escape him. His hands measured out gin, whiskey, and soda, while the others assumed Dylan and Stella had provided this too. Mary caught his eye as he handed her a glass. Her smile was gentle, but her brow furrowed as if she saw more than she spoke. She touched his hand briefly in thanks, then turned back to Stella's commentary about the centerpiece. The living room swelled with voices. Guests shed coats, laughter bounced off walls. Stella guided them with ease, directing them to seats, ensuring compliments circled back to her choices. Jasper kept pouring, his role narrowing to bartender, each glass a small submission. Then, Dylan made his entrance proper. He descended the staircase slowly, pausing halfway to greet someone, to laugh, to project charm. He adjusted his jacket, ran a hand through his hair, and spoke as though the evening was his to command. Stella glanced up at him, their silent partnership playing to the room. "Welcome, everyone," Dylan said, voice ringing above the chatter. "We're so glad you could come." This year felt like the right time to celebrate properly. We wanted to share our home with people who matter. Our home. The word slid across Jasper's chest like ice. He looked around and saw heads nodding, glasses raised. The fiction had become truth in their ears. Lisa asked where the bathroom was. Stella pointed confidently, never once glancing at Jasper. Anne complimented the arrangement of chairs, noting how balanced the table looked. Dylan claimed the credit with a shrug, as though balance had always been his strength. Jasper continued at the cart, steady, silent. He measured another pour, set another coaster, wiped a ring from the wood. From across the room, John asked Dylan about work, and Dylan spun a tale that sounded far grander than reality. Stella added details, polishing edges, while Tom laughed at every line. The story grew brighter with every telling. Jasper, listening, knew the truth. Months of unemployment, excuses wrapped in optimism, but the room believed the show. The evening pressed forward, and Jasper felt himself pushed further back. He carried trays of drinks to the dining room, watching guests praise the creamy cloth, the elegant centerpiece, the polish of glassware. Each compliment found Stella. Each question drew Dylan's answer. When he returned the empty tray to the bar, Mary's eyes caught his again. This time her glance lingered, puzzled. She tilted her head slightly, as if she wondered why Jasper, the man she had always known as careful host, now stood at the edges of his own house. She opened her mouth to speak, but Stella swept past with a new story, pulling Mary back into the circle. Jasper refilled his mug with plain water, holding it carefully. He looked at the name cards set across the table, his seat still marked at the window, far from the head. He counted again. 12. Always 12. Dylan's voice carried above the rest, charming, confident, filling the room with easy authority. Jasper watched him gesture, watched Stella nod, and realized with quiet clarity that the evening had already been staged. His role had been assigned without rehearsal. He was not the head, not the host, not even the co-star. He was background furniture, expected to keep the drinks flowing and the silence intact. The guests never noticed the shift. They smiled, ate canapés, raised glasses, and spoke as though this house had always belonged to Dylan and Stella. Only Jasper felt the truth pressing against his chest, a weight that grew heavier with every laugh that passed him by. And as the snow thickened outside, he knew the stage was nearly set for a scene none of them expected. The room hushed as plates settled and glasses chimed softly against the cream cloth. Steam rose from the turkey, while candles trembled as if the flames knew what was coming. Jasper looked at the chair at the head of the table, the chair he had sanded and oiled, the chair from evenings with Margaret. He inhaled, stepped forward, and reached for it. Dylan slid in front of him with a smooth, casual motion, one hand on the seat back, the other raised in a mock apology. "You're not invited," Dylan said. The words hit the air with the crack of ice splitting in a glass. Lisa's fork paused halfway to her mouth. John's hand closed over Mary's, protective. Stella did not speak, but her chin lifted, and she edged closer to Dylan's shoulder as if posing. Jasper looked at his son, then passed him to the guests. His voice came even and clear. "I set this table for years. I'll sit where I always sit." "Not tonight," Dylan said. "You can take the seat by the window. We need this space for serving. Tom will carve." A small laugh scattered around the table, brittle and uncertain. Stella smiled to soften things. "It's just logistics," she said, but she didn't move. She stood beside Dylan like a starched ribbon. Jasper released the chair back. He didn't back away. He let the pause lengthen until it became a fact. Then he picked up his water and moved to the end by the window. Snow tapped the glass. Forks resumed. Dylan filled the silence. I'm sorry, everyone. My dad can be particular. He likes to make things about rules and receipts. We've kept the house afloat this year. It's been a lot, but we did it because family steps up. He does nothing but count pennies and correct where we put the spoons. Tom chuckled, glancing at Jasper as though seeking permission to keep laughing. Stella's smile thinned. Anne's eyes narrowed, weighing. Mary's smile faded. Jasper did not raise his voice. He asked a question. Who paid the mortgage this month? Dylan rolled his eyes. Why does that matter at dinner? Because you said you kept the house afloat, Jasper answered. Who paid the mortgage? Dylan shifted, still standing at the head spot. We covered so much else, he said. Groceries, wine, all of this. It evens out. So not the mortgage, Jasper said. Stella slid a glance at Dylan, then at the guests. Dylan waved a hand. We're talking about tonight. I organized it. I called everyone. Dad just has to sit and not make it weird. Anne leaned toward Mary and murmured. He said, called, not paid. Jasper let it thread into the room. Who pays the utilities? Jasper asked. We all do, Dylan said. That's how family works. He gestured around. Do you feel cold? No, because we handle it. Mary spoke, gentle but steady. Handle it how? Dylan smiled at her. Automatic withdrawals, he said. It's automatic. Whose name is on those withdrawals? Jasper asked. Dylan opened his mouth, closed it, and shrugged. The account is Dad's, but we pick up everything else. Look at the table. It isn't free. Jasper nodded. He let that agreement sit until Stella reached for a wine bottle to refill glasses. Jasper continued. Who bought the turkey? We did, Stella said quickly. Premium, humane, a crown for Christmas. Jasper turned his head to Tom. You carved at Thanksgiving somewhere else. Who bought that turkey? Tom blinked. Lisa's parents. Why? Because I'm curious how hosts are defined, Jasper said. If buying meat makes you the owner, then Lisa's parents own her apartment. Lisa half laughed. Dylan tapped the knife handle against the board. Enough. We're not debating ownership like a board meeting. We brought life into this house. People came because I invited them. Anne's voice carried cleanly. How long have you lived here, Dylan? 8 months, Dylan said. Temporary. We said that. Mary set her hands flat on the table. Whose name is on the deed? Jasper answered before Dylan could. Mine. Margaret's and mine, until she passed. Now mine. He folded his napkin. Dylan laughed, too loud. That's a technicality. This is our home now. We've maintained it and improved it. Dad hides upstairs. We deal with real life. Jasper poked a small hole. Who paid for the centerpiece? Stella lifted her chin. I did. I chose it. I ordered it. I approved the silk. On whose card? Jasper asked. Stella hesitated. Dylan's, she said. And what number did he type in? Jasper asked. Dylan's smile thinned. That's ridiculous. Because the card used was mine, Jasper said. Every charge for 2 months has routed through my account. You have a card from college tied to it. You never returned it. It still works. Tom shifted uneasily. Lisa frowned, a new picture in her eyes. John looked down. Mary stared at Dylan's hand on the chair Jasper should have taken. Dylan's voice sharpened. So what if some things ran through your card? Want a refund at the table? Should we pass a hat? From here, you contribute nothing. I found the guests. I planned the dishes. I made tonight happen. Jasper stayed even. You invited people to my house. You planned with my dishes. You made this night happen with my money. Stella cut in, quiet. He's trying, Jasper. It's been a hard year. It has, Jasper said, and I helped. The bridge was not meant to be permanent. What bridge? Dylan demanded. The help, Jasper said. Help is a bridge. You crossed 8 months ago. Somehow you pitched a tent. Laughter died in Tom's throat. The knife's reflection shivered on Dylan's wrist. Anne spoke again, needle-sharp voice. Do you pay rent? Dylan scoffed. Families don't charge rent. Do you buy groceries without reimbursement? Anne asked. We buy plenty, Dylan said. Mary looked at Jasper. Did he? Sometimes, Jasper said. Often, no. And when he did, he used my account. Stella swallowed. We meant to settle up after the holidays. Jasper turned to the guests, not to indict, but to allow light in. I have not asked for payment. I asked for respect. It has not arrived. He looked at Dylan. Son, take your hand off my chair. Dylan didn't move. Why? Because your feelings are hurt. Because the night isn't centered on you for once. Because this is my table, Jasper said, and because you told me I am not invited to sit at the head of it. You're a freeloader, Dylan said, snapping the word as if he could smash the room with it. You take and take. You do nothing. We carry you. The gasp moved like a breeze. Lisa's eyes widened. John whispered Mary's name. The candles shook. Jasper did not stand. He folded his hands. What is my monthly mortgage payment? Dylan looked blank. What is the water bill? Jasper asked. The electric, the gas, the internet. Give me one figure from the last 3 months. Dylan offered nothing. What is your rent contribution? Jasper asked. We don't do that, Dylan said. That's not how families work. How many weeks have you been job hunting? Jasper asked. I'm networking, Dylan said. Leads take time. How much did the wine cost? Jasper asked. On my card. Stella answered. Small. Too much. Mary faced Stella. Did you ask before you used his account? Stella's lips parted, closed, parted again. I thought it was shared, she said, and even she sounded unsure. Anne pushed a glass aside as if resetting the scene. Did you ask before inviting us? She asked. We wanted to celebrate properly, Dylan said. You should be grateful. Jasper's eyes softened. Gratitude runs on truth. Without it, it's theater. So what? Dylan shouted. You going to evict us on Christmas? You going to call the cops like some landlord? Silence changed, heavy with consequence. Jasper rose, finally, not to fight, but to finish. He looked at Stella, then at Dylan. You have until morning to leave. Stella flinched. Dylan barked a laugh, then another, each one thinner. You can't be serious. I am, Jasper said. The bridge ends here. You wouldn't, Dylan said. You wouldn't do that to your son. Jasper held his gaze. I won't do it to my home again. He looked around the table at Mary, at Anne, at Tom, at Lisa. The room had stopped being Dylan's stage. It had become a witness stand. Dylan's hand dropped. He pointed at Jasper, words tripping. You'll regret this. I regret waiting this long, Jasper said. Stella drew a breath. We can talk later, she said, voice trembling. We can work out a plan. The plan is morning, Jasper said. Pack what you need tonight. The rest can be picked up in the afternoon. Snow blurred the windows. Dinner cooled. The head chair stood between them like a question finally asked out loud. Jasper did not touch it. He did not need to anymore, for now. The dinner ended, not with dessert, but with dispersal. Chairs scraped, coats were collected. Murmurs of confusion and apology followed one another like falling dominoes. Mary pressed Jasper's hand at the doorway, whispering that she had not understood the full picture until tonight. John's eyes were heavy with discomfort as he thanked Jasper quietly. Anne lingered longer, her gaze sharp and unsettled, before offering a small nod that carried more weight than words. Tom avoided eye contact altogether, guiding Lisa out with a hand at her back, his usual laughter gone. The door closed on the final guests, and the house fell into a quieter register, though not yet peace. From the kitchen came muffled voices, sharper than knives against cutting boards. Dylan's voice rose and cracked. Stella's broke and folded. Their argument carried through vents and walls, distorted but clear enough. Words like respect, money, loyalty, and betrayal hung in the air. Glass clinked, then silence, then another burst of heated tones. Jasper did not move toward them. He remained in the living room, lowering himself into his chair, the only seat that had never been fully taken from him. The cushion sagged into his familiar shape. For the first time in months, he let himself lean back and take possession. The snow outside thickened, settling on branches and roof lines. Light from the street lamps spilled across the drifts, making them gleam like silver. Inside, Jasper rested his hands on the arms of his chair, steady. He felt the thrum of the furnace, the faint drip of cooling pipes, the rhythm of a house that had survived many winters. Tonight, it survived one more. Margaret's photograph on the mantel caught his eye. She wore the smile she had given him the day they moved in, when everything still smelled of fresh paint and possibility. He imagined her voice, not scolding, not despairing, but firm. Respect yourself, and others will learn how. The imagined line did not come as comfort alone. It came as instruction. For months he had bent in the hope of preserving peace, swallowing small insults and larger costs. Tonight the balance shifted. Respect was not something to wait for. It was something to model. He could almost feel Margaret's hand resting on his shoulder, steadying him the way she once did when he overthought even small matters. She would not have allowed her table to be taken, her home to be reframed, her legacy to be claimed by others. She would have smiled politely, then drawn the line. It had taken him too long, but now he heard her clearly. Upstairs, Dylan's voice thundered again, breaking mid-sentence into a sound closer to despair. Stella answered, lower but cutting. They circled blame, like two animals tethered by a chain, each pull against the other loud enough to rattle the silence. Jasper closed his eyes, not in fatigue, but in reflection. He thought of the notebook on his desk, the neat rows of receipts, the rising slope of costs. He thought of the mortgage slips, of the deed folded carefully in the fireproof box, of the automatic withdrawals that told a story no words could deny. Evidence did not shout. It simply waited until asked. Tomorrow it might be asked. He let the rehearsal begin in his mind. Morning would come. Dylan would test the line, perhaps with charm, perhaps with guilt. Jasper would not debate. He would present facts, calmly. If resistance grew, he would pick up the phone. He already knew the number. 2 officers would arrive, professional and unbending, and the weight would shift further. He would open the door, hand them the papers, and let process do what emotion had failed to. He imagined their calm nods, their measured voices. Pack essentials now, they would say. Arrange the rest later. It was a script he could trust. Jasper opened his eyes and found the snow still falling, steady as breath. The house was finally quiet enough that he could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the hall clock. His chair creaked as he shifted, reclaiming its familiarity. The banister upstairs still bore the polish of Margaret's hand. The china, though used tonight without his leave, still belonged to her memory and to him. Slowly, piece by piece, the house returned in his mind to its rightful state. It had been borrowed, yes, but not stolen. Tomorrow it would be reclaimed fully. The voices upstairs softened into a lull, the kind of exhaustion that follows futile battle. He heard a door slam, then footsteps retreat. After that, nothing. Jasper exhaled, long and steady, the kind of breath that feels like decision. He rose, walked to the window, and looked out over the yard. The snow covered the paths he had shoveled earlier, erasing his work, but that did not bother him. Tomorrow he would clear it again. Some work was not wasted, even if it was repeated. Boundaries, like snow shoveling, had to be maintained, not set once and forgotten. He returned to the chair and sat with deliberate ease, his hands folded in his lap. His mind settled into readiness. Tonight had been exposure. Tomorrow would be resolution. He was no longer the background furniture of his own home. He was the man who owned the deed, the man who would decide, the man who finally heard Margaret's voice with clarity. Respect yourself, she had said, and others will learn how. The lesson had come late, but it had come in time. The house sighed around him, wood creaking in the cold, pipes clicking in their slow rhythm. Outside, snow built a clean page across the lawn. Tomorrow would write on it, but tonight, Jasper allowed himself silence. Not silence of defeat, but silence of control returning. He leaned back into his chair and let the stillness root itself. By morning, he would be ready. Morning arrived with a light the color of steel. The house smelled of cooled gravy and candle wax. The dining room bore the wreckage of performance, napkins stiff with wine, the cream cloth flecked with gravy, candles leaning. Jasper stood at the threshold and surveyed it. He stacked plates, slid forks into a basin of suds, and folded the cloth back to expose the oak beneath. The grain looked like a wound opened to air. He dressed with deliberate care. Dark trousers, the pressed shirt Margaret once called his dignified armor, a sweater the color of midnight. He shaved, combed his hair, and tied his boots. In the mirror, he saw a man who had carried weight and set it down. He slipped his old notebook into his cardigan pocket and touched the envelope that held the deed. The gesture steadied him. In the kitchen, he brewed coffee in his chipped mug and stood by the window while the snow softened to mist. The house exhaled the previous night. From upstairs came a door, steps taking the stairs too quickly. Dylan appeared in the hallway, hair damp, wearing a smile that tried to be easy. It was holiday stress, Dylan said lightly. We went too far. People say things. Family's family. Jasper turned, mug steady. Good morning. Dylan spread his arms. I know you were upset. Of course, I get it. But it was a tense night, and we all contributed. Stella's already cleaning. I'll help. We'll reset, okay? We will reset when you have moved out, Jasper said. Dylan blinked as if the light changed. Come on, be serious. I am, Jasper said. You had until morning. It is morning. Dylan laughed, a single bark meant to break the spell. Dad, look outside. It's Christmas week. Nowhere is open. Where do you expect? Us to go on short notice. You have had 8 months, Jasper said. Dylan shifted to reason when Charm stumbled. Let's be rational. An eviction, if that's the word you want, is a process. You can't just decide and snap your fingers. That's not how anything works. We're family, not tenants. Jasper set his mug on the counter, aligning it with a dry ring. I am not repeating myself. Pack what you need. Essentials first. We'll arrange a time for the rest. You're angry, Dylan said. That's fair. But last night wasn't the whole picture. Think of all we did. We made your house shine. People admired it. They saw us as a family. Isn't that what Margaret would have wanted? Jasper looked at the oak table, at the faint crease the cloth had pressed into the polish. Margaret would have wanted honesty. She would have wanted respect. We respect you, Dylan insisted. We're here. We've taken care of things. Remember the faucet. I called the plumber. On my account, Jasper said. Respect does not charge another man's card without asking. Okay, fine. Yes. We used your card sometimes, Dylan said. That's adjustable. We can pay you back once I get this interview next week. And Stella's got a lead. 2 weeks, tops. It's dumb to make a big move now. It'll fracture things. Jasper straightened a towel, then walked to the wall phone and rested his hand on it. The gesture altered the air. Dad, Dylan said, softer. Don't escalate. I'm not escalating, Jasper said. I'm setting a boundary I should have set months ago. Think of Christmas. Think of appearances. Imagine the neighbors if they see us carrying boxes. They'll think you're cruel. They'll say you turned your son out in the snow. They will think I kept my word, Jasper said. They will think I took responsibility for my home. Dylan's jaw flexed. He looked toward the stairs and back. Stella's crying, he said. She feels humiliated. Is that what you want? I want my house back, Jasper said. You may cry while you pack. Both statements can be true. Dylan's laugh returned, jagged. After everything we did last night, the turkey, the wine, the guests, that centerpiece alone cost a fortune. On my card, Jasper said again. The money isn't the point. The point is you called me a freeloader in my house while living here without paying toward the roof over your head. Dylan winced. Fine. I shouldn't have said it. I was heated. You were baiting me with questions and making me look small. I snapped. Happy. I'm not interested in happy, Jasper said. I'm interested in change. Pack. You'll regret this, Dylan said, but the thunder had drained. He stared at the phone as if it were a live wire. Jasper stepped aside so nothing stood between Dylan and the hallway. Upstairs, a cupboard thumped and quieted. Stella's footsteps moved, hesitant, like someone counting minutes that refused to bend. Let's create a plan. Dylan tried again. Give us a week. Give us until New Year's. That's basically nothing. You get your peace back. We transition cleanly. It's reasonable. You've had 8 months, Jasper said once more. Do you really think the police will show up just because you ask? Dylan said. On Christmas? They'll laugh. They will arrive because this is my house, Jasper said. I have the deed, the utilities, and the mortgage records. They will do their job. Dylan folded his arms, then unfolded them. His shoulders sagged. The performance wavered. He looked older than last night. He opened his mouth and closed it. I don't want to call them, Jasper said, but I will if I must. Stella came to the doorway, eyes swollen. She held a small box. We can be ready in a few hours, she said quietly, not looking at Dylan. Essentials now. The rest later. Dylan turned, startled. You're agreeing to this. She did not answer him. She spoke to Jasper. I will pack the china we bought. I'll leave Margaret's. I'm sorry for that, Jasper. I should have asked. Thank you, Jasper said. Dylan looked between them, fury and fear tangling. This is insane. We're family. Families don't do this. Families don't take what isn't theirs and then call the owner a freeloader, Jasper said. Silence spread like frost. Jasper lifted his hand from the phone because he no longer needed the gesture. The shift had happened. Dylan saw it. He straightened and nodded. I'll get the suitcases, he said. Jasper picked up his mug. Coffee had cooled, but it tasted clean. The house no longer held its breath. Outside, a plow moved down street, clearing the way. Inside, a path had been cleared. The next knock would not surprise him. The knock came just after noon, firm and measured. Jasper opened to 2 officers in winter coats, faces open, calm. The taller one gave his name and nodded. Thank you for coming, Jasper said. He gestured to the dining room, bare oak again. On the sideboard, a folder waited. Here are the documents, he said. Deed, mortgage, utilities, withdrawals, expense ledger. The taller officer read the deed and dates. The partner checked the utilities and mortgage slips. Is your son and his wife here? The taller officer asked. Upstairs, Jasper said. Did you invite them to live with you? The partner asked. Temporarily, Jasper said. 8 months ago. This morning I told them to leave. They refused. I want them out today, and I will allow them to retrieve the rest later. We will speak with them, the taller one said. Dylan reached the landing with a smile that tried for charm and landed short. Officers, thanks for coming. We were sorting things. Dad gets anxious. Sir, may we speak with you and your wife? The taller officer said. Stella appeared with a zipped suitcase and a small box of clothes, eyes rimmed red. How long do we have? She asked. Gather essentials now, the partner said. Arrange pickup for the rest later with the homeowner's permission. Dylan's smile thinned. I have rights here. I've contributed. I made last night happen. This is my home too. Who is on the deed? The taller officer asked. My father, Dylan said. Who pays the mortgage? The partner asked. He does, Dylan said. But that is not the point. It is the point for our purposes. the taller officer said. You were permitted to stay temporarily. Permission can be withdrawn. Today, it has been. Dylan's eyes flashed. So we get tossed out on Christmas. That is your decision. We are here to keep the peace, the partner said. The homeowner has asked you to leave. Gather essentials now. Coordinate a time to collect the rest. We will remain until you depart. He turned to Jasper. Would you like us to stand by while they pack? Yes, Jasper said. Dylan moved toward the kitchen, then turned back with sudden sweetness. Dad, you do not want this. People will talk. Think of Mary and John. Think of Anne. Do you want them to see police outside your house? Jasper looked to the window. Across the street, Mary's curtain had parted. John stood behind her. Anne paused on the sidewalk with a paper bag under her arm. I want my home returned to order, Jasper said. Stella lifted the suitcase and walked past Dylan. We will need an hour, she said quietly. I will pack the rest on the scheduled day. I am leaving the dishes that were not ours. That is acceptable, Jasper said. An hour is fine, the taller officer said. We will remain. Dylan tried again, voice soft with pleading. Dad, please, give us until next week. I have an interview. We can find a place then. Do not do this to us. You will find a place because I am doing this, Jasper said. Dylan's voice snapped. You are cruel. After everything we did for you, you are throwing your son into the snow. Do you have keys? The partner asked. Please hand them to your father now. If there are duplicates, list them and return them at pickup. Dylan slapped the keys onto the sideboard. The next hour moved in practical motions. Stella filled 2 suitcases and a plastic tub, folding sweaters, wrapping perfume in socks, sliding a framed photo into a side pocket. Dylan stomped between the living room and the hall, scooping electronics and chargers, tossing a belt into a backpack, then taking it out again. The officers kept it to the edges, present but unobtrusive, answering small questions with brief, steady replies. Neighbors drifted into view like figures in a silent play. Mary and John spoke quietly on their porch and lifted a hesitant wave. Anne nodded once, solemn, as if to say the boundary mattered. Stella zipped the second suitcase and set it by the door. We are ready, she said. The rest is clothing and cookware and a few books. We will return with a car and a list. Write the list, the partner said. Bring it when you return. We will confirm items with the homeowner and remain while you collect them. Dylan came down the stairs with the backpack on one shoulder and a jacket half-zipped. He stopped at the bottom, jaw tight, eyes hot with a fury that did not know where to land. He looked at Jasper, at the officers, at the window, with the neighbors and the falling snow. This is not over, he said, each word hard enough to bruise. Have a safe trip, son, Jasper said. The officers opened the door. Cold air carried winter into the hallway. Dylan pushed past, nearly slipping on the top step before catching himself. Stella followed with the suitcases and the tub. The officers held the door and waited until they reached the car. On the porch, Dylan looked back one last time, mouth set. He seemed about to speak again, but the words did not arrive. He closed the car door. The engine coughed to life. Snow dusted the windshield. The taller officer placed the keys in Jasper's palm. We will file the report, he said. If there is any concern during pickup, call us. Change the locks today if you can. Jasper nodded. Thank you for your professionalism. The partner offered a brief smile. The house is yours. We are glad to help keep it that way. They stepped into the cold, boots crunching. Jasper closed the door gently, turned the deadbolt, and stood in the entry, listening to the house breathe. The silence felt clean. He set the keys on the sideboard and exhaled, the longest breath he had taken in months, and the rooms settled around it now. Jasper stood in the entry for a long breath, the keys cooling on the sideboard. He turned to the dining room, to the oak table finally bare. The cloth lay folded on a chair. The glittering arrangement was gone. He ran his palm along the wood as if greeting an old friend. The head chair waited where it belonged. On the mantel, the nativity Margaret loved had drifted out of order. The carved sheep faced a corner and the wise men crowded the stable. Jasper lifted each piece and set them as she preferred, Mary and Joseph shoulder to shoulder, the shepherd a step behind, the star centered above them. When he stepped back, the tableau steadied the room. He moved through the living room and gathered what the night had scattered. Coasters returned to their drawer. The bar cart rolled to its place beside the bookshelf. He polished a dried ring from the top. On the coffee table lay Dylan's watch, the heavy one that flashed during grand gestures. He weighed it in his hand and carried it to the porch, set it on the rail, and closed the door with quiet certainty. The air had gone stale after so many people. Jasper lifted the latches on the windows. Winter slid in, clean and bright. At the third window, he paused, remembering how Margaret aired the rooms every December morning. "It wakes the wood," she used to say. He left the windows open while he worked. In the kitchen, he washed the last plates, drying them to a clear shine and returning each to its shelf. He checked the drawer where the carving set rested and slid it shut. He wiped the counter until it felt like satin. The refrigerator held a few leftovers. He labeled them in his neat hand and stacked them in one row. Order returned with the click of the door. He walked the hallway and saw new work and old. Comforts. A scuff on the stair wall would want paint. The rug runner needed a tack reset. He made notes in his head. Change locks. Call the locksmith by noon. Ask Anne for a recommendation. Replace smoke alarm batteries. Cancel the card Dylan used. Close the extra subscriptions. The work felt clean. He added a mental note to change the back door deadbolt, gather stray spare keys from neighbors, and store the new set in the fireproof box. He climbed the stairs and opened the spare room that had turned into a cave. The bed Margaret kept for guests had vanished beneath bins and clothing. He cleared the quilt with patient hands, folding each sweater and setting aside what belonged to Dylan and Stella for pickup. He smoothed the cover and sat on the edge. The room would have purpose again. A small desk by the window for repair projects, a shelf for manuals, a task lamp. In his and Margaret's room, he opened the closet and ran his fingers along the line of her scarves. He chose the blue one she favored when the air turned sharp and draped it over the chair by the window. He opened the sash and let the day sweep through. He stood and let the air move across his face until it felt like a blessing. Downstairs again, he paused at the dining room threshold and imagined the next dinner. It would not be spectacle. It would be belonging. 2 plates, maybe 3, if Mary joined. A pot of stew from his own slow recipe. He pushed the head chair fully under the table. Its feet landed with a quiet, certain sound. He pictured Mary's laughter at that simple table and Anne telling a story that wound around the room like the old days. He took out his notebook at the kitchen table and began the after-action page. Locks to change, spare keys to label, confirm the pickup hour, speak to Mary and John to clarify the facts, invite Anne for coffee next week, ask the library if they need an extra hand for New Year sorting, return to evening walks after supper, read a chapter before bed. He added one more line that mattered more than the rest. Boundaries before favors. His gaze drifted to the porch rail where the watch caught the winter light. He did not worry. If someone took it, that would be its own story. If Dylan returned early and saw it, he would know. The message needed no argument. It simply drew a line where a line belonged. He closed the notebook and breathed in the new cold, his shoulders lowered and his jaw unclenched. He walked to the mantel and lit one candle from the box Margaret had tucked behind the clock. The small ivory wick burned with a steady flame. The firelight did not compete with the snowlight. It joined it. In that mingled glow, the room felt like itself again. The light seemed to honor the wood and the years it had held. The list lengthened but did not weigh on him. He pictured the locksmith's van in the drive and the new cylinders clicking into place. He pictured the spare room cleared and bright. He pictured an evening with the radio low and a book open, steam rising from a mug he would find on the shelf. "Kindness isn't compliance," he said softly. "Kindness needs edges so it can hold shape." The sentence settled into his bones. He would remain the man Margaret loved, the man the library trusted. He would simply do it without surrendering his own chair. He closed the windows one by one. The house kept the memory of the cold, fresh and bracing. He locked the front door and checked the bolt. Then he walked room to room again, not to correct anything, only to see. The home answered with quiet syllables, wood and glass, hinges and heat, all of it speaking the same word he had waited months to hear. Mine. A week later, the sidewalks were clean and the library buzzed with the soft chaos of returns. Jasper checked in a tower of books while Mrs. Henderson described misplacing a paperback beneath her cat. He scanned barcodes and she insisted the cat slept only on classics. When a fairy tale set off a warning beep, the system called it a glitch and they laughed the kind of laugh that brushes dust from a room. A boy in a red scarf asked for mysteries, and Jasper walked him to the shelf, enjoying the old rhythm of being useful. By mid-morning, the cart was empty again, the scanner warm in his hand, and his shoulders carried ease instead of weight. He signed the volunteer sheet, tucked a ribbon back onto the donations table, and felt the small satisfaction of routines returning. Anne arrived near noon with 2 paper cups, one marked with his name. She waited while he helped a boy find a mystery, then offered the drink. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I should have asked sooner. I thought they were helping. I didn't see the edges." "Thank you for saying it," Jasper said. They sat by the bulletin board, steam lifting between them. He said the house felt lighter. She admitted she had seen the officers but not the truth, and shame kept her from knocking. "Seeing is different when a show is playing," he said. "If you need anything," she answered, "I am 5 doors down and stubborn." "The locks are changed," he said. "The quiet is doing the rest." She smiled. "Then let me bring soup sometime." "Soon," he said. She touched his sleeve and left him with the cup and a steadier afternoon. That evening, the house answered him with quiet. He hung his coat, set his mug on the bar cart, and took his place in the recliner. The window showed a sky clear as glass. He read a chapter, then dialed a number Tom had texted. A handyman answered on the second ring, cheerful, "Available tomorrow." "There is a frame in the hallway," Jasper said. "Margaret loved it even with the tilt, but I would like it true again." The handyman promised to bring anchors and a level. After the call, Jasper straightened 2 books on the end table and opened the window a finger's width. Winter air moved through the room. He breathed until his shoulders lowered of their own accord. He made a simple supper and ate at the oak table without a cloth, the grain warm under his palms. Afterward, he wrote a card and tucked it into the notebook. Monthly dinner, first Thursday. Guests by invitation only. Menu, stew, bread, small pie. No speeches. He wrote names slowly. Mary and John, Anne, Mrs. Henderson, if she felt up to an evening out. Perhaps the handyman later, if kindness grew into familiarity. He imagined Margaret's china because he chose it, candles lit because he struck the match, the head chair occupied because he pulled it back and sat. He pictured talk that did not compete, and silence that felt like rest. On the last line, he added a rule he could keep. Ask first. Thank often. Leave with things as you found them. When the dishes were rinsed and the lamp turned low, he sat and let the room speak. The house was not a stage. It was shelter, history, and choice. Outside, a bus sighed past and the night folded around the block. Inside, the frame waited to be rehung, the chair held him, and the list faced the future. He would keep the dinners modest and regular, the door open to those who honored it, the line bright enough to see in the dark. Jasper closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet take its place beside him as the pattern he would live by. 12. The house had learned his quiet again, and in that quiet, Jasper finally named the lesson he had been avoiding. Silence isn't love. Boundaries are. He had mistaken holding his tongue for mercy, as if swallowing insult could nourish peace. It never did. It only fed resentment in two directions: the giver who felt used and the takers who felt entitled to keep taking. His throat was sore from months of words unsaid. His home was sore from months of lines left unmarked. The morning he reclaimed his rooms, he felt the change travel back through the year like thaw, loosening what had frozen. He thought of the first weeks after Dylan and Stella arrived, how small compromises carved quiet grooves into wood. His chair, his mug, his calendar, his routines. None of those losses were crimes on their own, which is why they were easy to excuse. But together they told a story. A home that stopped asking permission because the owner stopped asking for respect. He had told himself that love makes room. Now he understood that love also closes doors, kindly and on time. A guest counts the blessing of a roof. A resident pays attention to the roof that keeps him dry. The hidden cost of enabling never appears on the first receipt. It shows up later, in how your shoulders lift when you hear footsteps, in how you apologize for standing where you belong, in how your name fades from your own mailbox. It shows up when neighbors greet others before you in your driveway, and when you redefine patience as endurance because you're avoiding conflict. Enabling is counterfeit generosity. It spends what you never offered and forges your signature in your sleep. It buys applause for the moment and a bill for the morning. Real generosity tells the truth first and then gives what it freely chooses to give. He remembered the dinner like a courtroom with candles. He had not raised his voice. He had asked questions and let the answers reveal the shape of things. Deed, utilities, groceries. Facts do not perform. They simply stand when called. What changed him was not the insult alone, though that word sliced fast and clean. What changed him was watching good people at his table look unsure about who owned what, and realizing he had trained them to be unsure by keeping quiet. Boundaries are not a punishment. They are the frame that lets the picture remain true. Without edges, every scene melts until no one knows where home begins. Loving adult children as adults means inviting responsibility instead of subsidizing avoidance. It means saying we can talk once you are carrying your part. It means refusing to rescue the same person the same way again because you want to be seen as kind. Kindness helps someone stand. Rescuing keeps them on the floor. He could love Dylan and still end the arrangement. He could open his door in emergencies and still require keys to be returned when the emergency passed. He could answer the phone with warmth and still say no without apology. Love with a spine does not bruise. It simply holds. He promised Margaret, as he straightened the nativity and reset the head chair, that the house would be a place of peace. Peace was not quiet at any cost. Peace was order, consent, and mutual care. Peace was truth, spoken before resentment calcified. If she were here, she would have taken his hand and turned him toward the line sooner. He had been late, but not late. The walls remembered them. The rooms forgave him the moment he told the truth out loud. He felt her agreement in the way the candle steadied when he lit it. There was nothing cinematic about the correction. It was procedural, almost plain, and that was part of the relief. Papers on a sideboard, officers with patient voices, keys pressed into a palm, suitcases rolling across a porch. He had feared a rupture that would poison love forever. Instead, he found the alchemy of limits. The moment you choose the line, you recover the self that can love without bargaining against dignity. Love without boundaries had made him smaller. Love with boundaries let him breathe at his full height. He evaluated the weeks ahead with steady eyes. He would say yes more often to the library and no more quickly to demands disguised as emergencies. He would host a small table and leave 2 chairs unfilled for people who honor the room that holds them. He would watch for the old habit of apologizing at the wrong times and retire it. He would practice sentences that lower the temperature. "I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. Let's revisit once your plan is clear." He would forgive his delay without excusing it and keep his promise while it was still warm. He also understood that some neighbors would frame the story poorly. They would test the headline against their fears and choose the cheap morale. That was outside his walls now. Anyone who wanted to understand could ask, and he would answer plainly. We tried a bridge. Then it became a campsite. Then I rebuilt the road. He did not need converts. He needed clarity. He would not argue intent when consequence told a cleaner truth. When he slept without waking at every sound, he woke with gratitude more than victory. The bed held one absence and one presence. Margaret was gone. His self-respect had returned. He walked the rooms and felt not triumph, but steadiness. He set the head chair back an inch and heard the legs settle, as if the house itself agreed. He breathed the winter air and tasted the clean edge of a life with lines, the kind that keep warmth in and weather out. The promise he kept was simple. Keep the home a place of peace, not chaos. That meant routine and purpose and laughter that did not require repair the next morning. That meant doors that opened to people who wiped their feet and closed gently against people who didn't. That meant being willing to love from a distance when proximity turned everyone false. If Dylan called, he would answer. If Stella knocked, he would listen. But the chair would remain where it belonged, and the card would remain in his wallet, and the lock would answer. He wrote the sentence in his notebook to see it in ink, because seeing matters. Silence isn't love. Boundaries are. Then he added the line he wanted to hand to the world, like bread, plain and nourishing. Family is who respects your no as much as your yes. Snow kept falling, soft as breath, laying a clean sheet over the yard and the street beyond. Jasper washed the last cup, set it to dry, and walked to the dining room. The oak shone without the cream cloth, its grain a quiet river. He placed 2 plates where habit lived, his own at the head, another opposite for whoever shared stew or conversation on any ordinary night. Then he paused, reached for a third, and set it midway along the length of the table. Not for Dylan, not for memory, for hope, plain and patient, waiting without pressure for tomorrow to arrive. He opened the box behind the mantel clock and took out one of Margaret's candles. The wick carried the faintest trace of pine from winters long gone. He struck a match, cupped the flame, and touched it to the wick until light took. The small fire steadied, gathering the edges of the room into warmth. Shadows leaned and then settled. Silence rose but did not feel empty. It felt held. Jasper turned off the overhead fixture and let the candle's glow do the work. Snow traced the window panes with silver. The extra plate waited without impatience. He pulled out his chair, sat, and rested his hands on the wood he had guarded. The house breathed with him, slow and even. Somewhere a car passed, a distant hush across the street. Then nothing. He listened to the radiator tick, the clock answer, the air settle. He did not speak. He did not need to. The candle burned, the snow fell, and the third plate kept its place at the table, an ordinary promise in a home made orderly again. He let the warmth rest, and the night agreed, keeping watch while possibility quietly took its seat at last. Your turn. If your grown child called you a freeloader while living rent-free in your home, what would you do? Stay silent or set a deadline? Tell me in the comments what boundary you would draw, what words you would use, and what you wish you had said sooner. Do you think Jasper handled it fairly, or would you have given more time? I read every story you share, and your experience helps someone else find their voice. If this episode spoke to you, tap like so it reaches others, and please subscribe for more true-to-life tales about dignity, limits, and second chances. Share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that kindness needs edges. Next time, the stakes twist even tighter. The day I found a stranger living in my house, with documents claiming it was theirs. How do you prove a home is yours when a folder says otherwise? And how far will someone go to keep a lie standing? Do not miss it. Thanks for spending time here tonight. Until the next chapter, protect your peace, keep your chair, and remember that love grows stronger when no means no. See you in the next story.